The dust hung heavy in the air as Thea Parker stood frozen on the boardwalk of Gonzales, Texas, clutching the hands of her 3 children while the whispers around her cut deeper than any knife. It was 1878, 4 years since her husband had abandoned them all, leaving her to bear not only the weight of raising their children alone, but also the cruel judgment of a town that had little mercy for a woman in her position. "There she goes again, parading those poor bastards around town," came a harsh whisper from Mrs. Whitley, the banker's wife, just loud enough for Thea to hear. Thea tightened her grip on 8-year-old Samuel's hand, feeling him stiffen beside her. At only 8, he already understood too much. 6-year-old Mary clutched her skirts, while 4-year-old Daniel, still innocent to the world's cruelty, tugged at her hand, wanting to see the candies in the general store window. "Mama, can we go?" Samuel whispered, his eyes downcast. The boy had grown careful in public, learning early to avoid the stares that followed them everywhere in Gonzales. "Just a moment, sweetheart. We need to pick up the flour for Mrs. Hendricks," Thea replied, her voice steady despite the burning in her throat. Seamstress work and laundry barely kept food on the table, but she'd never let her children see her falter. She squared her shoulders and began moving toward Patterson's general store when the sound of horses approaching made her pause. A group of riders appeared at the end of the street, dust billowing behind them. The townspeople paused to look, conversations dying as the strangers approached. At their lead was a tall man with broad shoulders, his face shadowed beneath a weather-beaten hat. Behind him rode 4 other men, all carrying the unmistakable look of cowboys who'd been on the trail too long. Their arrival wasn't unusual. Gonzales sat on a cattle route to San Antonio, but something about the lead rider made Thea's heart skip a beat. He dismounted with fluid grace, scanning the street with watchful eyes. When his gaze landed on Thea and her children, something flashed across his face: recognition, perhaps, though Thea was certain they'd never met. She would have remembered a man like him, with his sharp jawline and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat as he approached. His voice was deep, touched with an accent she couldn't place. "Sir," Thea acknowledged, pulling her children closer. "Keenan Hayes," he introduced himself, offering a calloused hand. "Just rode in from the Double Cross." The Double Cross Ranch was one of the largest operations in the county, owned by the reclusive and wealthy Jacob Montgomery. That explained the quality of the man's horse and gear, despite his trail-worn appearance. "Thea Parker," she replied, briefly accepting his hand. "Welcome to Gonzales." He crouched down, bringing himself eye-level with her children. "And who might these fine young ones be?" Before Thea could answer, Mrs. Whitley appeared at her side, her smile viper-sweet. "Oh, these are Thea's. Situation. Her husband vanished years ago, leaving her with these 3. Such a burden for a poor woman alone." Thea's face burned with humiliation. She opened her mouth to respond when Keenan rose to his full height, his expression darkening as he looked at Mrs. Whitley. "Is that so?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. Mrs. Whitley, oblivious to the change in his demeanor, nodded eagerly. "Indeed. We all try to be charitable, but a woman ought to know her place, and these children without a proper father—" "Madam," Keenan interrupted, his voice cutting through her gossip like a knife, "I'd appreciate if you didn't speak about my family that way." A hush fell over the gathered onlookers. Thea stared at him in confusion. Keenan turned to the children, a gentle smile transforming his weathered face. "Hello there," he said, kneeling again. "You must be Samuel, Mary, and little Daniel." The children looked up at their mother in bewilderment. Thea herself was speechless. Keenan stood and faced the small crowd that had gathered. "These children are mine," he announced, his voice carrying down the street, "and I've come back for them and their mother." Thea's heart pounded against her ribs as whispers erupted around them. She had never seen this man before in her life. "Mr. Hayes," she began carefully, "I think there's been some misunderstanding." He leaned close, speaking only for her ears. "Play along, Mrs. Parker. I'll explain everything later. For now, let me help you." Something in his eyes, earnestness, perhaps, or simple kindness, made her hesitate. After 4 years of struggling alone against the town's judgment, could she trust this stranger's inexplicable offer of help? "Mama." Samuel tugged at her hand, confusion in his young eyes. Thea looked from her son to the stranger claiming to be something he wasn't. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. "Children," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "say hello to your father." The lie tasted strange on her tongue, but the look of pure wonder on her children's faces, especially Samuel's, nearly broke her heart. For 4 years, they had weathered the whispers, the pointed fingers, the cruel words. For 4 years, they had asked about the father who had abandoned them. Now a stranger was offering them a shield, however temporary. Keenan's smile was warm as he gathered the stunned children closer. "I've been away too long," he said, loud enough for the gawkers to hear. "But I'm back now, and I aim to make it right. Mrs." Whitley's mouth hung open in shock, while the other townspeople exchanged glances of confusion and disbelief. Thea felt dizzy with the suddenness of it all, but she maintained her composure, years of enduring public scrutiny having taught her how to wear a mask. "We should get these little ones home," Keenan said, scooping up Daniel, who giggled in surprise. "My men will see to the supplies. Where are you staying, Mrs. Hayes?" The false name jolted Thea back to reality. "The small cottage at the end of Maple Street," she answered quietly. "Perfect." He turned to his men. "Jackson, see to the horses and our gear. Tell Montgomery's man I'll meet him tomorrow about those cattle contracts. The rest of you get yourselves rooms at the hotel. I'll be staying with my family." The cowboys exchanged knowing looks but nodded and dispersed to follow orders. Keenan offered his arm to Thea, who took it hesitantly, as they walked down the street, Mary holding Thea's other hand and Samuel trailing beside them. Thea leaned closer. "I don't know what game you're playing, Mr. Hayes, but no game, madam," he interrupted gently. "Just couldn't stand by and watch good people being treated poorly. We can sort out the details in private." Thea nodded stiffly, aware of the eyes following them. Whatever this man's true intentions, he had just upended her carefully constructed life with a few simple words. The cottage at the end of Maple Street was small but meticulously maintained. A vegetable garden stretched along one side, and flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds near the front porch. It was humble but clean, a testament to Thea's determination to provide her children with some semblance of stability. Keenan set Daniel down as they reached the gate. The little boy looked up at him with undisguised curiosity. "Are you really our pa?" he asked bluntly, with the directness only a 4-year-old could muster. Thea sucked in a breath, but Keenan crouched down to the child's level. "Your mama and I have some talking to do, little man. Why don't you and your brother and sister go play in the yard for a bit while we sort things out?" Samuel, ever protective, stepped forward. "Come on, Daniel," he said, taking his younger brother's hand. "Let's see if we can find any more of those blue rocks you like." Thea watched her children move toward the garden, then turned to face the stranger who had just claimed them as his own. "You'd better come inside, Mr. Hayes." The interior of the cottage was as tidy as its exterior, a small sitting area with worn but clean furniture, a kitchen with a cast iron stove, and doors leading to what were presumably bedrooms. Embroidered samplers hung on the walls, and a half-finished dress was draped over a chair near the window, evidence of Thea's work as a seamstress. "You have a lovely home, Mrs. Parker," Keenan said, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. "It's small, but it's ours," she replied, moving to put the kettle on the stove. Her hands trembled slightly. "Now, would you mind explaining why you just told the entire town of Gonzales that you're the father of my children?" Keenan leaned against the doorframe, watching her movements. "I apologize for the surprise of it. I didn't plan it that way, but when I heard that woman talking to you like that with your children standing right there..." His jaw tightened. "I know what it's like to grow up with folks whispering about you. No child deserves that." Thea paused, studying him. "That's very noble, Mr. Hayes, but you've just complicated my life enormously." What happens when you ride out of town and the gossip starts all over again? It'll be worse than before. I don't intend to ride out anytime soon, he said simply. I've taken a permanent position with the Double Cross. Mr. Montgomery has made me his ranch foreman. That still doesn't explain why you'd insert yourself into our lives this way. Keenan was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the window where the children could be seen playing in the yard. My sister was in a situation similar to yours back in Tennessee. Husband left her with 2 little ones. The town was merciless. He hesitated, pain flickering across his face. She couldn't bear it, took her own life when the youngest was just 3. Thea's hand flew to her mouth. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago, he said, though his eyes suggested otherwise. When I saw you standing there with your children, heard the way that woman was talking, something in me I couldn't stay silent, not again. The kettle began to whistle and Thea busied herself with making tea, using the moment to collect her thoughts. When she turned back to him, her expression was resolute. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Hayes, but my children and I have managed for 4 years on our own. We don't need saving. I can see that, he replied, accepting the cup she offered. You've done an admirable job. Those are fine children out there, but everyone needs help sometimes, Mrs. Parker, even the strongest of us. And what exactly are you proposing? To continue this charade? To pretend to be my long-lost husband returned from wherever William disappeared to. For now, yes, Keenan said calmly. It would give the children some respite from the gossip and you as well. I have a good position at the Double Cross, a steady income. I could help financially, at least until you decide what you want to do next. Thea set her cup down with a sharp clink. And in return, what do you want, Mr. Hayes? His eyes met hers directly. Nothing improper if that's what you're asking. I'd like a place in town to lay my head, meals when I'm not at the ranch, and the satisfaction of knowing I've done something good. That's all. You're a strange man, Keenan Hayes. I've been called worse, he said with a slight smile. Look, we don't have to decide everything today. I can take a room at the hotel tonight, give you time to think. No, Thea interrupted, surprising herself. If we're going to do this, we need to be convincing. The town is already watching. You should stay here. Keenan raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Thea wasn't sure of anything, but she knew that the look on Samuel's face when Keenan had claimed them was worth the risk. For her children, she would do anything, even trust a stranger with kind eyes and a story that tugged at her heart. There's a small room off the kitchen, she said. It's not much, but it has a cot. You can stay there. Before Keenan could respond, the front door burst open and the children tumbled in, Daniel clutching a handful of small blue stones, his face alight with excitement. Mama, look what we found. Can Pa see them too? He asked, stumbling over the new word. Thea exchanged a glance with Keenan, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Of course, sweetheart. Show your father what you've found. As Daniel proudly displayed his treasures, Thea watched Keenan interact with her children. He was gentle and attentive, asking questions and listening with genuine interest to their responses. Samuel remained cautious, but Mary was already warming to him, showing him a doll she'd made from corn husks. This is madness, Thea thought. Yet as the afternoon stretched into evening and Keenan helped her prepare a simple supper, telling stories that made the children laugh, she couldn't deny the warmth that had entered their little home, a warmth it had lacked for far too long. Later, after the children were tucked into bed, Thea sat with Keenan at the kitchen table, working out the details of their arrangement and the story they would tell the town. William Parker left 4 years ago, heading west for opportunities in California, Thea explained. That's what I told everyone when he disappeared. Then that's what we'll say happened to me, Keenan replied. I went to California, tried my luck in the gold fields, realized what I'd left behind, and came back to make things right. And the name difference. We'll say I used my middle name out west. William Keenan Hayes Parker, went by Hayes in California to make a fresh start. Thea nodded, impressed by his quick thinking. You've done this before, haven't you? Created stories, I mean. A shadow crossed his face. I've had to reinvent myself a time or two. Nothing criminal, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just, life hasn't always been kind. I understand that better than most, she said softly. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the small clock on the mantel. Thank you, Thea finally said, meeting his eyes. For what you did today. It was rash and complicated and possibly foolish, but thank you. Keenan's smile was warm. Get some rest, Mrs. Parker, tomorrow's likely to be quite a day. Thea, she corrected him. If we're to be convincing as husband and wife, you should call me Thea. Thea, he repeated, the name rolling off his tongue like he'd said it 100 times before. Good night, then. As she closed her bedroom door, Thea leaned against it, her heart racing with equal parts fear and something else, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope, perhaps, or the dangerous beginnings of trust. Outside her window, the stars hung low over Gonzales, witnessing the strange new chapter beginning in the small cottage at the end of Maple Street. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the kitchen windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Thea had risen early, as was her habit, to begin bread for the day and prepare breakfast before the children woke. She was startled to find Keenan already at the stove, coffee brewing and bacon sizzling in a pan. You cook, she observed, tying her apron around her waist. One of many surprising talents, he replied with a grin. Spent time as a chuck wagon cook on cattle drives when I was younger. Can't say I'm fancy, but no one ever complained of hunger. Thea moved beside him, reaching for eggs and flour to make biscuits. They worked in surprisingly comfortable silence, moving around each other in the small kitchen as if they'd been doing so for years. I thought I'd ride out to the Double Cross after breakfast, Keenan said as he turned the bacon. Need to speak with Montgomery about the work he's hired me for. Then I'll stop by the mercantile, pick up whatever supplies you might need. Thea paused in her biscuit making. That's kind, but we don't need charity. Not charity, Thea, he corrected gently. If I'm to play the role of returning husband, I should act the part. A man provides for his family. Before she could argue further, the patter of small feet announced Daniel's arrival. The little boy's eyes widened when he saw Keenan still there, as if he'd half expected the man to have vanished in the night. You're still here, he said with childish bluntness. Keenan crouched down to his level. I promised I would be, didn't I? Daniel nodded solemnly. Mama says promises are important. Your mama is a wise woman. Keenan ruffled the boy's hair. Want to help me set the table? By the time Samuel and Mary joined them, breakfast was ready, and the small kitchen was filled with the warmth of fresh biscuits and the rich aroma of coffee. Thea watched as Keenan interacted with her children, answering their curious questions with patience and humor. Samuel remained reserved, his young eyes watchful, but he didn't reject Keenan's gentle overtures. Will you be staying with us forever now? Mary asked, her voice hopeful as she looked up at Keenan. Thea tensed, but Keenan answered smoothly. I'm certainly planning to be here for a good long while. I've missed too much already. His eyes met Thea's across the table, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the deception they were weaving and the complexity of unraveling it later. But for now, the joy on Mary's face made it seem worthwhile. After breakfast, Thea stood on the porch watching as Keenan mounted his horse, a handsome chestnut gelding. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that somehow seemed both formal and intimate. I'll be back before supper, he promised. She nodded, aware of Mrs. Hendricks watching from across the street, no doubt burning with curiosity about the sudden appearance of Thea Parker's husband. Be careful, she found herself saying, the words coming unbidden. His smile deepened. Always. As he rode away, Thea turned to find Samuel standing in the doorway, his young face troubled. He's not really our pa, is he? The boy asked quietly. Thea's heart sank. At 8, Samuel was too perceptive, too familiar with the harsh realities of their life to be easily fooled. She knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. No, sweetheart, he's not, but he's a good man who wants to help us. Samuel considered this, Because people are mean to us, because we don't have a real pa, partly, Thea admitted. But also because he understands what it's like to be alone. I think he needs a family as much as we might need him. Is he going to stay forever, like he told Mary? Thea hesitated. I don't know, Samuel, but for now, having him here makes things easier for us. Can you understand that? The boy nodded slowly. I won't tell Mary or Daniel, they're too little. Thank you, Thea whispered, pulling him into an embrace. You're such a brave, good boy. Will we have to call him Pa? Samuel asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Only when others are around. When we're alone, you can call him Mr. Hayes if you prefer. Samuel pulled back, his expression serious beyond his years. I'll call him Pa, so nobody knows we're pretending. Thea's throat tightened with love for this child who had shouldered too much responsibility too young. Whatever makes you comfortable, my love. As Samuel ran off to join his siblings, Thea stood, smoothing her apron and mentally preparing for the day ahead. She had laundry to finish for the Millers and alterations on a dress for the mayor's wife. The work would keep her hands busy while her mind grappled with the sudden change in their circumstances. By mid-morning, word had spread throughout Gonzales about the return of Thea Parker's husband. Women who had previously avoided her began stopping by, ostensibly to welcome back the prodigal spouse, but clearly burning with curiosity. Such a surprise to see William back after all this time, Mrs. Collins remarked, perched on Thea's sofa with a cup of tea. And calling himself by a different name now. How interesting. Keenan is his middle name, Thea explained, the lie growing easier with each telling. He preferred it while he was away. And California, did he find his fortune in the gold fields? Some success, Thea replied vaguely. Enough to realize that family is worth more than gold. Mrs. Collins nodded appreciatively at this sentiment. He seems quite taken with the children, even young Samuel, who can be so reserved. The implication was clear. Samuel's serious nature had often been attributed to his questionable parentage in town gossip. Samuel is cautious by nature, Thea said firmly. He gets that from his father. It was strange how easily the falsehoods flowed, how readily she defended Keenan as if he truly were her children's father. By the time Mrs. Collins left, promising to tell her husband all about William's return, Thea felt drained from the performance. The afternoon passed in a blur of work and fielding more visitors. By the time Keenan returned, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. He dismounted, leading a pack horse laden with supplies. Looks like you've had company, he observed, nodding toward the freshly swept porch and the plate of cookies sitting on the small table, offerings from suddenly friendly neighbors. Half the town's women have been here, Thea confirmed, helping him unload the provisions. I believe we're the most interesting thing to happen in Gonzales since the Travis Hotel caught fire last spring. Keenan chuckled, the sound warm in the cooling evening air. Did you satisfy their curiosity, as much as necessary? We'll need to be careful with our story, make sure we don't contradict each other. He nodded, handing her a package wrapped in brown paper. Got something for you. Nothing fancy, but I thought it might help our charade. Thea unwrapped the package to find a simple gold band nestled inside. A wedding ring, she murmured, seemed appropriate if we're to be convincing. Keenan looked suddenly uncertain. If it's too much, no, Thea interrupted, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fits surprisingly well. You're right, it's a necessary detail. His shoulders relaxed. Good. I also got something for the children, nothing extravagant, but I thought you didn't have to do that. I wanted to, he said simply. Inside, they found the children waiting eagerly, having heard the horses arrive. Daniel launched himself at Keenan, who caught him with practiced ease. Whoa there, partner. You'll knock us both over, he laughed, swinging the boy up onto his shoulders. Mary approached more shyly, but her eyes brightened when Keenan produced a small cloth doll with real hair and a gingham dress. Samuel received a pocket knife, a man's tool, Keenan explained seriously, while Daniel was delighted with a set of wooden animals, carved and painted with remarkable detail. Did you make these? Thea asked quietly as the children examined their gifts. Keenan nodded. Had some time at the ranch today while waiting for Montgomery. Whittling's a habit from way back. The care evident in the gifts touched something in Thea. This wasn't the gesture of a man simply playing a role. There was genuine thoughtfulness behind it. Dinner that evening was a lively affair, with Keenan regaling the children with stories of his travels, some true, Thea suspected, and others embellished for their entertainment. After the meal, he insisted on handling the dishes while Thea helped the children with their bedtime preparations. When she returned to the kitchen, she found it spotless, with Keenan sitting at the table, a piece of wood and his knife in hand, working on what appeared to be another animal for Daniel's collection. "You're good with them," she said, taking the seat across from him. "The children, I mean." "They make it easy," he replied, his hands never pausing in their skilled movements. "They're good kids, Thea. You've done well by them." "I've tried," she said softly. "It hasn't always been easy." "Tell me about William," Keenan suggested, looking up from his carving. "The real William." "If I'm to step into his shoes, even just for show, I should know what kind of man he was." Thea's expression tightened. "He was charming when he wanted to be. That's how he won me over pretty words and grand promises. We married when I was 18, had Samuel within the year. Things were good at first, or I thought they were. What changed? William did. Or maybe he was always that way and I was too young to see it. He drank too much, gambled what little money we had. When I was expecting Mary, he began disappearing for days at a time. After Daniel was born, the absences grew longer. Then one day, he just didn't come back." Keenan's hands had stilled on the carving. "Did you ever hear from him again?" "A letter, about 6 months after he left. Said he was heading to California, that he'd send for us when he'd made his fortune." Thea's laugh was brittle. "I knew even then it was a lie. William never intended to come back or provide for us. He was running from responsibility, from the mess he'd made of his life here." "I'm sorry," Keenan said simply. "Don't be. We're better off without him," Thea replied firmly. "My father was a good man who taught me the value of hard work. I've managed to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. The children have never gone hungry, even if we've gone without luxuries." "You're remarkable," Keenan said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Thea felt her cheeks warm. "Hardly, just doing what any mother would do." "Not any mother," Keenan countered. "My own disappeared when I was 5, left me and my sister with a father who resented our existence. It takes a special kind of strength to do what you've done." The personal revelation surprised Thea. "Is that why you understand my children so well? Because of your own childhood?" He nodded, returning to his carving. "I remember what it was like, being looked at like you're somehow less than others, through no fault of your own. And your sister?" "The one you mentioned yesterday," pain flashed across his face. "Rebecca. She was 7 years older than me, practically raised me herself. When she married at 17, I thought she'd escaped, but her husband, he was like your William, charming at first, then cruel. When he left her with 2 babies, the town turned on her, called her a fool, said she'd brought it on herself." Thea reached across the table, touching his hand. "I'm so sorry, Keenan." His eyes met hers, filled with old grief. "She hung herself from a cottonwood tree behind our house. I was the one who found her." "Oh God," Thea whispered. "Her children went to an orphanage in Nashville. I was barely 20, had no means to care for them myself. By the time I had something to offer, they'd been adopted. I never found them again." He set down his knife, the carved figure a bear complete. "So you see, when I saw you standing there with your children, those people judging you. You saw your sister," Thea finished for him, "and I saw a chance to do something right, something I couldn't do for her." The honesty of his words hung between them, creating a new understanding. This wasn't just a charade for Keenan, it was a form of redemption. "What did Montgomery say about your arrangement with us?" Thea asked, changing the subject to something less painful. "Will it affect your position at the ranch?" Keenan smiled, the shadow lifting from his eyes. He was surprisingly supportive, said a foreman with family ties in town is more likely to stay put. "I'll split my time between here and the ranch, a few days there, a few days here." It's common enough for ranch hands with families. And he doesn't mind that you acquired a family overnight, Thea asked skeptically. Montgomery's not one for town gossip. Man cares about results, not rumors. If I manage his ranch well, he doesn't much care about my personal affairs. They talked late into the night, sharing stories and building the foundation of their shared history, the narrative they would present to the town. By the time Thea retired to her bedroom, she realized with some surprise that she felt more at ease with Keenan Hayes than she had with any man since her father died, including her real husband. As she slipped beneath her quilt, the gold band on her finger caught the moonlight streaming through the window. A pretend marriage to a near stranger, it was madness. Yet somehow, it felt like the most sensible decision she'd made in years. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect Sunday in late spring. Thea dressed carefully in her best calico dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. The children, too, were in their Sunday best, scrubbed and combed to perfection. When Keenan emerged from his small room, Thea's breath caught slightly. He had transformed from the trail-worn cowboy of 2 days ago into a gentleman, wearing a clean black suit with a crisp white shirt. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. "You clean up well, Mr. Hayes," she said, smoothing Mary's ribbons to hide her sudden nervousness. "As do you, Mrs. Hayes," he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. "You look lovely." The new name still felt strange to Thea's ears, but not as uncomfortable as she might have expected. Church was their first true test as a family. As they walked down Maple Street toward the white clapboard building at the center of town, Thea could feel eyes on them from every direction. Keenan seemed oblivious to the attention, chatting easily with the children, his hand resting lightly at the small of Thea's back in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. The whispers intensified as they climbed the church steps. Reverend Thompson, a portly man with kind eyes, greeted them warmly. "Mrs. Parker, or should I say Mrs. Hayes now? I've heard the wonderful news of your husband's return." "Thank you, Reverend," Thea replied, conscious of the curious faces around them. "May I introduce Keenan?" The men shook hands and the Reverend beamed. "A pleasure, sir. A family reunited is always cause for celebration in the eyes of the Lord." Inside, they took seats near the back, but their presence was like a pebble dropped in still water, causing ripples of attention throughout the congregation. Thea sat rigidly, her spine straight as a poker, while Keenan appeared completely at ease, helping Daniel with his hymnal and placing a reassuring arm around Samuel's shoulders. When Mrs. Whitley passed their pew, her gaze lingered on Keenan with undisguised curiosity. "So good to have you join us, Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice syrupy. "What a blessing that you've returned to your family after such a long absence." The implication in her tone was clear, but Keenan merely smiled pleasantly. "The blessing is entirely mine, Mrs. Whitley. I've been fortunate enough to be welcomed back by my extraordinary wife and these wonderful children. Many men in my position wouldn't be so lucky." Mrs. Whitley's smile faltered slightly at his pointed response, and she moved on with a sniff. Thea bit back a smile, catching Keenan's eye. He winked at her, a small gesture of conspiracy that warmed her from within. The service itself was a blur to Thea, her mind too full of the strange circumstances that had brought her to this moment. When the congregation rose for the final hymn, Keenan's deep baritone joined the chorus beside her, his voice blending with hers in perfect harmony. After the service, they endured a gauntlet of introductions and reintroductions as the curious townspeople crowded around to meet the returned husband. Keenan handled each interaction with remarkable ease, neither elaborating too much on their fabricated history nor appearing evasive. He was, Thea realized, a natural performer or perhaps someone who had indeed reinvented himself more than once before. "Your husband is quite charming," observed Mrs. Henderson, the milliner, as Keenan entertained a group of men with a carefully edited story of his time in California. One would never guess he'd abandoned his family for 4 years. The barb was thinly veiled, but Thea had weathered far worse. People make mistakes, Mrs. Henderson. The measure of a man is whether he tries to right those wrongs. Indeed, the woman replied, though her tone suggested skepticism. Well, the children certainly seemed taken with him. This, at least, was undeniably true. Mary hadn't left Keenan's side all morning, while Daniel had insisted on riding on his shoulders as they walked home from church. Even Samuel, initially so reserved, had begun to warm to him, asking questions about ranch work and horses with increasing interest. The days that followed fell into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. Keenan spent 3 days at the Double Cross, returning to town for the remainder of the week. When at the ranch, he threw himself into his role as foreman, earning the respect of the cowhands with his hard work and fair leadership. In town, he became an active participant in the Parker household, helping with repairs, entertaining the children, and even assisting Thea with her sewing business by building her a better work table for cutting fabric. 2 weeks after his arrival, Thea stood at her kitchen window, watching as Keenan taught Samuel how to properly split firewood in the backyard. The boy's face was alight with concentration as he mimicked the man's movements, pride evident in his small frame when the wood split cleanly under his axe. "He's good for them," came a voice from behind her. Thea turned to find Mary standing in the doorway, a wisdom beyond her 6 years in her eyes. "Yes," Thea agreed softly. "He is." "Are you going to marry him for real, Mama?" the little girl asked. "Samuel told me he's not really our pa, but he's pretending to help us." Thea knelt before her daughter, smoothing the child's golden curls. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Mr. Hayes is a good man who's helping us, but I think you should marry him," Mary interrupted with childish certainty. "He makes you smile. You didn't smile much before." Before Thea could respond, Keenan and Samuel entered the kitchen, both flushed from their work and carrying armloads of split wood. "This young man is a natural woodcutter," Keenan announced, ruffling Samuel's hair. "Few more years, he'll be outworking me." Samuel beamed at the praise, setting his wood carefully by the stove. "Keenan says I can come to the ranch next week, help with the horses." "If that's all right with your mother," Keenan added quickly, glancing at Thea. She nodded, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. Of course, Samuel loves horses. That evening, after the children were asleep, Thea and Keenan sat on the small front porch enjoying the cool night air. Stars dusted the sky above Gonzales, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "Samuel called me by my name today," Keenan remarked. "Not Pa or Mr. Hayes, just Keenan." "Is that all right?" Thea asked. "He's been cautious about becoming too attached." "It's more than all right," Keenan assured her. "It means he's comfortable enough to choose what to call me. That's progress." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the creaking of the porch swing the only sound. "The town's beginning to accept our story," Thea said finally. "Mrs. Whitley even invited us to dinner next weekend, said it was high time we were properly welcomed back into society." She laughed softly. "After 4 years of barely acknowledging my existence," Keenan's expression darkened slightly. "People like Mrs. Whitley are quick to judge and slow to forgive." "Their good opinion isn't worth much." "Perhaps not," Thea agreed, "but their acceptance makes life easier for the children. Samuel hasn't come home from school with a bloody nose in 3 weeks. That's the longest stretch since he started attending." Keenan's hand tightened on the arm of the swing. "He was being bullied. You never mentioned that." "What was there to mention? Children can be cruel, especially when they're repeating what they hear at home. Samuel's strong, he never complained." "He shouldn't have had to be strong that way," Keenan said, his voice rough with emotion. "No child should." Thea studied his profile in the dim light from the window, struck by the depth of his feeling. "You truly care about them, don't you? Not just as part of our arrangement, but genuinely." Keenan turned to face her, his eyes serious in the darkness. "How could I not?" "They're extraordinary children, Thea. You've raised them to be kind, thoughtful, resilient. I've grown too." He hesitated, then continued, "I've grown very fond of them, of all of you." The admission hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Thea's heart quickened, and she found herself wondering what it might be like if their arrangement became something more real. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. "Keenan," she began carefully, "this situation between us, it was meant to be temporary, a way to shield the children from gossip." "And it still can be, if that's what you want," he replied, his voice gentle. "I made a promise not to complicate your life, and I intend to keep it." "But things have become complicated, haven't they?" Thea whispered. "The children are growing attached to you. Samuel talks about the ranch constantly. Daniel asks for your stories every night, and Mary—" She hesitated, then continued, "Mary asked today if I was going to marry you for real." Keenan's intake of breath was audible in the quiet night. "What did you tell her? That it was complicated, that you were helping us?" "Is that all we are?" he asked softly. "A helpful arrangement." Thea looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know, I never expected any of this. When William left, I swore I would never trust another man, never put myself or my children in a position to be abandoned again." "I'm not William," Keenan said simply. "I know," she whispered. "That's what makes this so difficult." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Thea, I don't expect anything from you, but I want you to know that what began as an impulsive act to help a stranger has become something more to me. These past weeks with you and the children have been the happiest I've known in years. For us too," she admitted, finally meeting his eyes. "But I'm afraid, Keenan, afraid of what happens if we allow this to become real and then I leave," he finished for her. "I understand that fear, I do, but I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to go." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Thea felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to be sure, for the children's sake as well as my own." "We have all the time in the world," he replied, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. "I'm not going anywhere." As the summer progressed, the Hayes family, as they were now known throughout Gonzales, settled into a comfortable routine. Keenan's position at the Double Cross flourished under his leadership, and Montgomery increased his responsibilities and his pay accordingly. Thea's sewing business grew as well, her social standing restored by her husband's return. The children blossomed under Keenan's influence. Samuel spent his free time at the ranch, learning about horses and developing a confidence he'd never shown before. Mary discovered an interest in drawing, encouraged by Keenan, who brought her pencils and paper from San Antonio. Even little Daniel seemed to walk taller, proudly introducing Keenan to anyone who would listen as "my pa." By July, the charade had become so seamless that Thea sometimes found herself forgetting it had begun as just that, a pretense. There were moments, watching Keenan teach Samuel to ride or listening to him read stories to the younger children, when she wondered if this was what her life was always meant to be. They still maintained separate sleeping arrangements, Keenan in the small room off the kitchen, Thea in the bedroom she'd occupied alone since William's departure. But there was an undeniable shift in their relationship: lingering glances, hands touching when passing the salt at dinner, conversations that stretched late into the night. One hot July evening, Keenan surprised them all by returning from the ranch with tickets to a traveling show performing in San Antonio the following weekend. "A real circus," Daniel exclaimed, bouncing with excitement, "with elephants and tigers." "And acrobats and clowns," Keenan confirmed, grinning at the children's enthusiasm. "I thought we could make a day of it, take the wagon to San Antonio early, have lunch at a proper restaurant, see the show, maybe stay overnight at a hotel." "Can we, Mama, please?" Mary begged, her eyes wide. Thea hesitated. "It sounds expensive, Keenan. Montgomery gave me a bonus for sorting out that boundary dispute with the Dixon Ranch," he explained. "I wanted to do something special for all of you." The genuine desire to please in his expression broke through Thea's reservations. "Then I suppose we're going to San Antonio," she said, laughing as the children cheered. The journey to San Antonio was an adventure in itself, with Keenan pointing out landmarks and telling stories of his travels to keep the children entertained during the long ride. They arrived in the bustling city by mid-morning, the children wide-eyed at the sight of so many buildings and people. Keenan had reserved rooms at a modest but respectable hotel near the main plaza. As he checked them in, the clerk smiled approvingly at the family. "Room for you and the missus and an adjoining room for the youngsters," he confirmed, handing over the keys. "First time in San Antonio?" "For the children, yes," Keenan replied easily. "Thought it was time they saw a bit more of the world than Gonzales." Thea felt a flutter of anxiety as they were shown to their rooms. They'd never had to share a bedroom before their arrangement in Gonzales allowing for separate spaces. But as a married couple staying at a hotel, separate rooms would raise eyebrows. The room itself was lovely, clean, and well-appointed, with a large bed, a washstand, and windows overlooking the busy street below. The children's room connected through a door with two smaller beds for the three of them to share. "I can sleep on the floor," Keenan offered quietly once they were alone, reading her concern. "Or in a chair if there's one comfortable enough." Thea felt a rush of affection for this man who was always so careful of her comfort, so respectful of her boundaries. "We'll figure it out later," she said, feeling suddenly shy. "Right now, I believe we promised the children lunch before the show." The restaurant Keenan had chosen was elegant without being intimidating, the kind of establishment that welcomed families but still felt special. The children sat up straight, using their best manners as they'd been instructed, though Daniel's eyes grew round as saucers when a waiter in a crisp white jacket set a plate of fried chicken before him. "This is the best day ever," he declared solemnly, making both Thea and Keenan laugh. After lunch, they made their way to a large open area on the outskirts of the city where colorful tents had been erected. The circus was everything the children had hoped for: exotic animals, daring acrobats, clowns who made even serious Samuel double over with laughter. Thea found herself watching Keenan almost as much as the performance, his joy in the children's excitement as evident as if it were his own. By the time they returned to the hotel, the younger children were half asleep on their feet. Keenan carried Daniel, who had nodded off completely, while Thea guided a drowsy Mary. Samuel, determined to show his maturity, insisted he wasn't tired at all, though his eyes were heavy. Getting the children settled took some time, with the excitement of the day making them resist sleep despite their exhaustion. Finally, all three were tucked into bed, Mary and Daniel sharing one while Samuel took the other. Thea closed the connecting door softly and turned to find Keenan arranging blankets on the small settee near the window. "That looks terribly uncomfortable," she observed. He shrugged, his smile easy. "I've slept in worse places. Trail drives don't exactly offer feather beds." Thea hesitated, then spoke before she could lose her nerve. "The bed is large enough for both of us if we're careful." Keenan looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "Are you sure?" She nodded, though her heart was racing. "It seems silly for one of us to be uncomfortable when there's plenty of room." They prepared for bed with careful courtesy, taking turns using the washroom, Thea in her modest nightgown and robe, Keenan in long underwear and a shirt. When they finally slipped under the covers, they lay rigidly side by side, a careful distance between them. "Thank you for today," Thea said softly into the darkness. "I haven't seen the children so happy in a very long time." "It was my pleasure," Keenan replied, his voice equally quiet. "Seeing their faces during the show, I don't think I've ever felt quite so satisfied." Thea turned her head to look at him, his profile barely visible in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "You're a good man, Keenan Hayes, better than we deserve to find." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "It's me who didn't deserve to find all of you. You've given me something I never thought I'd have again, a family." The emotion in his voice stirred something deep within Thea. Without overthinking, she reached out and placed her hand on his where it rested between them. "Perhaps we found each other exactly when we needed to," she whispered, his fingers entwined with hers, warm and strong. Perhaps we did. They fell asleep that way, hands joined, a bridge across the space between them. When Thea woke in the morning, she found herself curled against Keenan's side, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. The intimacy should have frightened her, but instead it felt right, as if this was where she belonged. Their return to Gonzales brought them back to their established routine, but something fundamental had shifted between them. The pretense was becoming reality, their arranged family growing more genuine with each passing day. August brought scorching heat and the excitement of the county fair. Keenan entered one of Montgomery's prize bulls in the livestock competition, while Thea submitted her intricate quilt work. The children participated in various games and contests, Samuel winning a blue ribbon in the junior horse grooming competition, much to his delight. As Thea stood watching her son receive his ribbon, she felt a presence at her side and turned to find Mrs. Whitley, her perpetual companion, Mrs. Henderson, beside her. "Your boy has quite a way with horses," Mrs. Whitley observed, her tone suggesting surprise at this discovery. "Yes, he does," Thea agreed proudly. "He's been learning from Keenan at the ranch." "Your husband seems to have taken to fatherhood remarkably well, considering his extended absence," Mrs. Henderson commented, the insinuation clear in her voice. Thea had grown weary of these thinly veiled barbs. "Keenan is a natural father," she replied firmly. "Some men are born to it, while others never quite manage, no matter how much time they spend with their children." Mrs. Whitley's eyebrows rose at Thea's direct response. "Well, I must say marriage has certainly made you more forthright, Mrs. Hayes." "Perhaps it's not marriage so much as finding someone who values me," Thea replied evenly. "It gives one a certain confidence." Before either woman could respond, Keenan appeared with Daniel on his shoulders and Mary at his side, all three laughing about something. "Ladies," he greeted them with a tip of his hat. "Beautiful day for a fair, isn't it? Mary here just won third place in the children's art exhibition." "How lovely," Mrs. Whitley replied, her demeanor instantly warming in Keenan's presence. "You must be very proud of your children, Mr. Hayes." "Prouder than words can express," he agreed, his hand finding Thea's and squeezing gently. "Of all my family." The possessive gesture and the warmth in his voice sent a thrill through Thea. As they moved away from the two gossips, Keenan leaned close to her ear. "Everything all right?" "You looked ready to do battle when I walked up." Thea smiled up at him. "Just the usual insinuations. They don't bother me as much anymore." "Good," he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners, "because you have nothing to prove to anyone in this town." Later that evening, as they walked home from the fair, the children running ahead with their prizes and ribbons, Keenan took Thea's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about our arrangement." Thea's heart skipped a beat. "Oh, it's been almost 3 months now." "The town has accepted our story, the children have adjusted, things are good between us, aren't they?" "Very good," Thea agreed softly. Keenan stopped walking, turning to face her on the moonlit road. "Then I was wondering if you might consider making our arrangement permanent." Thea's breath caught. "Permanent? I love you, Thea," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since that first day on the street when you stood so proud despite everything. I love your children as if they were my own. I want to be your husband in truth, not just in the eyes of the town." Tears welled in Thea's eyes. "Keenan, you don't have to answer now," he hurried to add. "I know you've been hurt before, that trust doesn't come easily, but I wanted you to know where I stand. I'm here, Thea, and I'm not going anywhere." Thea looked up at this man who had entered their lives so unexpectedly, who had shown her what a true partner could be. The wall around her heart, built brick by brick after William's betrayal, had been slowly dismantled by Keenan's steady presence, his kindness, his unwavering support. "I don't need more time," she whispered, stepping closer to him. "I love you too, Keenan. I think I have for weeks now, but I was afraid to admit it, even to myself." The joy that spread across his face was like the sunrise. He cupped her face in his hands with infinite tenderness. May I kiss you, Mrs. Hayes? For the first time properly, in answer, Thea rose on her tiptoes, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers in a kiss that felt like coming home gentle at first, then deepening with the months of restrained feeling between them. Mama and Keenan are kissing. Daniel's excited voice broke the moment, and they separated to find all three children watching them, Samuel with a knowing smile, Mary clapping her hands in delight, and Daniel bouncing up and down. Does this mean you're getting married for real? Mary asked eagerly. Keenan looked to Thea, who nodded, her heart too full for words. It does indeed, Miss Mary, Keenan confirmed, kneeling to gather all three children into his arms. If you'll have me as your pa for real. Yes, Daniel exclaimed immediately. I'd like that, Mary agreed, throwing her arms around his neck. Samuel, ever the most cautious, studied Keenan's face. You won't leave, like our real father did. Keenan met the boy's gaze solemnly. Samuel, I give you my word. I will be here for you, for your brother and sister, and for your mother every day for the rest of my life. No matter what. Something in his sincerity must have convinced Samuel, for the boy nodded once decisively, then stepped forward to join the embrace. Then I guess you're our pa now. Thea watched the tableau before her, this man who had begun as a stranger now holding her children with such love, and felt her heart might burst with happiness. When Keenan looked up at her, his eyes shining with emotion, she knew with absolute certainty that this was where they all belonged. They were married 2 weeks later in the same church where they had first appeared as a reunited family. Reverend Thompson, when approached about the unusual situation, had been surprisingly understanding. The Lord works in mysterious ways, he'd said with a twinkle in his eye. Sometimes the path to true marriage begins with a charitable act. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with Samuel standing proudly as Keenan's best man, Mary scattering wildflower petals down the aisle, and Daniel bearing the rings on a small cushion, his face solemn with the importance of his task. When Thea, radiant in a new blue dress she'd sewn herself, promised to love and cherish Keenan for all her days, the words felt both fresh and familiar, as if she'd been preparing to say them from the moment he'd stepped into their lives. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Thompson declared with evident satisfaction. Again, he added with a wink that made the congregation chuckle. The small reception at their home afterward was filled with well-wishers, including, somewhat surprisingly, Mrs. Whitley, who seemed genuinely moved by the obvious affection between the newlyweds. I may have judged you unfairly in the past, Mrs. Hayes, she admitted to Thea during a quiet moment. It takes courage to rebuild a family. I wish you both every happiness. Thea accepted the olive branch with grace. Thank you, Mrs. Whitley. We all deserve second chances, I believe. As the guests gradually departed, Thea found herself increasingly aware that tonight would be different from all the nights before. Keenan would not be sleeping in the small room off the kitchen. He would be sharing their bed now as her husband in every sense of the word. The children, exhausted from the excitement of the day, fell asleep quickly, leaving Thea and Keenan alone in the quiet house. They moved around each other with a new awareness, completing the familiar routines of securing the house for the night with stolen glances and shy smiles. When Thea emerged from behind the screen in her bedroom, wearing a new nightgown simple, but made of finer fabric than her usual, she found Keenan standing by the window, staring out at the starlit yard. Having second thoughts, she asked softly, only half joking. He turned to her, his expression so full of love it took her breath away. Only thinking how lucky I am, how close I came to riding past this town altogether that day. I'm glad you didn't, Thea whispered, moving toward him. He opened his arms and she stepped into them, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. My wife, he murmured into her hair, for real this time. Their first night together, as true husband and wife, was everything Thea had never dared to hope for, tender, passionate, a union of bodies that had already begun to know each other's hearts. In Keenan's arms, she discovered a joy she had never known with William, a completion that went beyond the physical. Afterward, lying in the circle of his embrace, Thea traced the lines of his face in the moonlight. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" He asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "For stopping that day. For claiming us as yours when we were at our lowest. For loving us all so completely." "Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done," he replied simply, "and the most rewarding." As autumn painted the Texas landscape in gold and crimson, life for the Hayes family settled into a rhythm of domestic contentment. Keenan continued his work at the Double Cross, his reputation as Montgomery's most trusted foreman growing throughout the county. Thea's sewing business flourished, her skills increasingly sought after for special occasions and fine garments. The children thrived under the stability of their new family structure. Samuel's interest in ranching grew, his natural affinity for horses developing under Keenan's guidance. Mary revealed a talent for music when Keenan surprised her with a small piano for her 7th birthday, while Daniel, now 5, began his first year of school, proudly telling anyone who would listen about "my pa who runs the biggest ranch in Texas." In November, shortly after the Harvest Festival, Thea discovered she was expecting a child. She shared the news with Keenan one evening after the children were asleep, watching his face transform with wonder and joy. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." The simple phrase held such meaning, a child born of their love, not claimed through circumstance but truly theirs from the beginning. "Are you happy?" she asked, though his expression left little doubt. In answer, he gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious glass. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you, Thea Hayes. You and our children, all 4 of them now, are everything to me." The news of the pregnancy spread quickly through Gonzales, met with genuine congratulations from the townspeople who had come to respect the Hayes family. Even Mrs. Whitley seemed sincerely pleased, bringing by a hand-knitted blanket for the coming baby. "Blue and yellow," she explained as Thea unwrapped the gift. "Suitable for a boy or a girl. It's beautiful," Thea said, touched by the gesture. "Thank you." Mrs. Whitley hesitated, then said, "I hope you know that many of us regret how we treated you before. It wasn't Christian of us." Thea smiled, laying the blanket carefully aside. "The past is behind us, Mrs. Whitley. I prefer to look forward." As winter settled over Texas, bringing cool nights and crisp days, the Hayes household prepared for both Christmas and the coming baby. Keenan spent his free time building a cradle, his skilled hands shaping the wood with loving care, while Thea sewed tiny garments from the softest fabric she could find. The children were equally excited about the new addition, though Samuel occasionally expressed worry. "Will you and Keenan still have time for us?" he asked Thea one afternoon as she rested on the porch swing, her hand on her growing belly. "When the baby comes," Thea pulled him close, this serious boy who carried too many worries for his 9 years. "Samuel, listen to me. Your father and I will always have time for you, Mary and Daniel. The new baby doesn't replace any of you, it just gives us one more person to love." Samuel considered this, then nodded. "Pa says the same thing. He says his heart just keeps getting bigger." The casual way he referred to Keenan as Pa now, without hesitation, warmed Thea from within. "Your father is a wise man," she said softly. Christmas that year was the merriest the children had ever known. Keenan brought home a tall pine tree, which they decorated with strings of popcorn, paper stars, and small wooden ornaments he had carved. Presents appeared beneath it, practical gifts like new boots and warm coats, but also treasures like books, a set of carved animals for Daniel, a new drawing set for Mary, and a fine pocket knife for Samuel. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire after the children had gone to bed, Keenan presented Thea with a small, carefully wrapped package. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "You've already given me so much." "Open it," he urged, his eyes warm in the firelight. Inside the package was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When Thea opened it, she found a tiny, perfect portrait of all three children on one side. "The other side is for the new baby," Keenan explained. "I had a photographer in San Antonio make the miniature from that portrait we had taken at the county fair." Tears filled Thea's eyes as she looked at the tiny faces of her children captured in the locket. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Help me put it on." As Keenan fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin, Thea felt a wave of contentment wash over her. From the moment William had abandoned them, she had feared she would never know true happiness again. Yet here she was, surrounded by love with a future brighter than she had ever dared to hope for. "I have something for you too," she said, retrieving a package from beneath her sewing basket. Keenan unwrapped it carefully to reveal a hand-stitched leather-bound journal, his initials tooled into the cover. "Open it," Thea urged, echoing his earlier words. Inside, on the first page, she had written, "For Keenan, who gathered us when we were lost and made us whole again. All my love always, Thea." "I thought you might use it to write down stories for the children," she explained as he ran his fingers over the inscription. "The ones about your travels or about the ranch, so they'll always have your words, your memories." Keenan looked up, his eyes suspiciously bright. "This is the finest gift I've ever received," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, my love." He pulled her into his arms, her back against his chest, his hands cradling her rounded belly. As they sat before the fire, wrapped in each other's warmth, Thea reflected on the journey that had brought them here from a chance meeting on a dusty street to this moment of perfect harmony. "What are you thinking?" Keenan asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most difficult circumstances," she replied, laying her hands over his where they rested on her stomach. "If William hadn't left, if the town hadn't been cruel, if you hadn't stopped that day. If my sister hadn't died, if I hadn't been wandering half my life looking for something I couldn't name," he added softly. "We might never have found each other," Thea finished. "It's a strange kind of blessing, isn't it, that so much pain could lead to such joy." "The best kind of blessing," Keenan agreed, holding her closer. "The kind that makes you appreciate every moment because you know how easily it might never have been." Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers painting the Texas countryside and the cry of a newborn filling the Hayes household. After a long but uncomplicated labor, Thea gave birth to a robust boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. They named him James Montgomery Hayes, honoring both Thea's father and the man whose ranch had brought Keenan to Gonzales. The children were enchanted with their new brother, each eager to help in their own way. Samuel appointed himself the baby's protector, Mary sang him lullabies, and Daniel carefully showed him all the wooden animals, explaining each one with solemn importance. Watching her family gather around the newest member, Thea felt her heart might burst with happiness. This was what she had feared she would never have again after William left a complete family, children who felt secure and loved, a husband who cherished her. Keenan proved himself as devoted a father to baby James as he had to the older children, rising in the night to bring the infant to Thea for feeding, rocking him back to sleep in the cradle he had made with his own hands. "He has your chin," Keenan observed one evening as they stood over the sleeping baby. "Strong and stubborn, and your eyebrows," Thea countered with a smile. "Poor child." Keenan laughed softly, pulling her into his arms. "He's perfect, all of them are." As James grew from newborn to infant to toddler, the family's happiness only deepened. By his first birthday, he was taking his first wobbly steps, clutching at his siblings' hands for support. By his second, he was a whirlwind of energy, following Samuel everywhere and attempting to mimic his every move. The older children continued to flourish. Samuel, now 11, spent increasing time at the ranch, his natural aptitude for the work becoming evident to everyone. Mary's musical talent blossomed, her sweet voice joining the church choir. Daniel, entering his third year of school, revealed a quick mind for numbers that impressed his teachers. When James was 3, Montgomery offered Keenan the opportunity to buy a partnership stake in the Double Cross. "It's a generous offer," Keenan explained to Thea as they discussed the possibility. "Montgomery's getting older, has no children of his own. He sees something in me," he says. "It's a wonderful opportunity," Thea agreed. "But can we afford it?" Keenan's smile was confident. "I've been saving since I took the foreman position. Between that and what Montgomery's offering in terms, we can manage it. It would mean a more secure future for all of us, especially the children." The decision was made, the partnership formalized, and by the following spring, the Hayes family had moved to a larger home on the edge of town, close enough for the children to continue at the Gonzales school, but with more room for their growing family and easier access to the ranch for Keenan and Samuel. The new house quickly became a gathering place for friends and neighbors. Keenan's position as Montgomery's partner elevated their social standing further, though neither he nor Thea put much stock in such things. What mattered to them was the warmth of their home, the laughter of their children, the life they had built together from such unlikely beginnings. 5 years after James's birth, Thea discovered she was expecting again. At 38, she had thought her family complete, but the news brought joy to them all. Even Samuel, now 16 and showing every sign of becoming as fine a rancher as his father, was excited at the prospect of another sibling. "As long as it's a girl," Mary insisted. "I'm outnumbered." "I'm hoping for twin boys," Daniel countered with a mischievous grin. "Then we'd have you completely surrounded." The good-natured bickering continued throughout Thea's pregnancy, with Keenan refusing to take sides. "Healthy is all that matters," he would say, his hand resting protectively on Thea's growing belly. "Boy or girl, this child is already loved." In the winter of 1893, as a rare snowfall dusted Gonzales with white, Thea gave birth to twin girls. Catherine Rebecca and Elizabeth Thea Hayes arrived within minutes of each other, tiny but perfect, with matching caps of dark hair and their father's gray eyes. "Twins!" Keenan exclaimed, cradling one daughter in each arm, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "How on earth are we going to tell them apart?" "A mother always knows," Thea assured him, exhausted but radiant. "And they'll develop their own ways of being different, you'll see." Mary was ecstatic at the arrival of not one but 2 sisters, her prayers for female reinforcement thoroughly answered. 6-year-old James regarded the tiny bundles with solemn curiosity, while Daniel, now 13, tried to appear grown-up and unimpressed, but couldn't help cooing when Catherine wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. Samuel, tall and strong at 16, the image of the man Keenan must have been at his age, stood by the window, watching the snow fall. "What are you thinking, son?" Keenan asked, joining him. Samuel turned, his expression thoughtful. "About how different everything would have been if you hadn't stopped that day in town, if you hadn't gathered us up and said we were yours." Keenan placed his hand on the young man's shoulder. "Life has a way of bringing us where we need to be, even when the path seems uncertain. I'm grateful every day that my journey led me to your mother and to all of you." Samuel nodded, his gaze returning to the snow-covered landscape. "I am too, Pa, I am too." As the twins grew from infants to toddlers, developing their distinct personalities despite their identical appearances, the Hayes family continued to flourish. Montgomery eventually retired completely, leaving Keenan as the managing partner of the Double Cross. Samuel, upon graduating from school, officially joined the ranch operation, his natural talent with horses making him invaluable in developing the Double Cross's breeding program. Mary's musical abilities led her to study piano in San Antonio, returning on weekends to teach lessons to the children of Gonzales. Daniel's aptitude for mathematics took him to college in Austin, where he studied engineering with an eye toward helping modernize the ranch operations. James, growing into a thoughtful boy with his mother's gentle nature and his father's steady strength, showed early signs of becoming a natural mediator, the peacemaker between his headstrong older brothers and his spirited twin sisters. The twins themselves, Katie and Lizzie as they came to be called, were a whirlwind of energy and contradictions, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. One cautious and observant, the other bold and adventurous. Through it all, Thea and Keenan remained the center of the family, their love deepening with each passing year, their partnership strengthening through every challenge and triumph. On the twins' 5th birthday, as family and friends gathered to celebrate, Mrs. Whitley, now an elderly widow, but still sharp as ever, approached Thea with a knowing smile. "I was just remembering that day, all those years ago, when your husband came riding into town and claimed you and your children as his own," she said, watching as Keenan tossed a laughing Lizzie into the air while Katie waited impatiently for her turn. "I thought it was the strangest thing I'd ever seen, a man appearing out of nowhere, declaring himself father to children everyone knew had been abandoned." Thea tensed slightly, wondering if after all these years, the old woman had somehow discovered their original deception. "It just goes to show," Mrs. Whitley continued, patting Thea's hand, "that the Lord works in mysterious ways. Some men are born to be fathers, Mrs. Hayes, and your Keenan is surely one of them. Blood matters far less than heart." Relief and gratitude washed over Thea. "Yes," she agreed softly, watching her husband now surrounded by all 5 of their children, his face alight with joy. "Yes, it certainly does." Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the children were in bed, Thea found Keenan on the porch, looking out at the star-filled sky. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He turned, gathering her close. "Just thinking about how full life is, how complete." Thea rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you ever regret it? That impulse that made you claim us that day?" "Never," he said firmly. "Not for a single moment, nor I," she whispered. "What began as a pretense became the most real thing in my life." Keenan kissed her then, with all the tenderness and passion of their years together, a kiss that held the promise of all the years still to come. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, Samuel and Daniel in the rooms they would soon outgrow as they became men, Mary dreaming perhaps of music and her future. James curled around his favorite wooden horse. The twins tangled together in the bed they insisted on sharing despite having separate ones. A family created first by circumstance, then by choice, and finally by love, the deepest, most enduring love Thea had ever known. A love that had begun on a dusty street in Gonzales when a stranger had gathered her children close and declared, against all logic and expectation, "They're mine." And in that moment of kindness, he had claimed not only the children but Thea's heart as well, setting them all on a path to happiness none of them could have imagined. As the years passed, and their children grew, married, and had families of their own, Thea and Keenan remained the beloved center of an ever-expanding clan. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations, embellished slightly with each generation but never losing its essential truth: that a single act of kindness had the power to change lives forever. And whenever anyone expressed amazement at the depth of their bond, at the family they had built from such unlikely beginnings, Keenan would simply smile and say what he had known from that very first day: "They're mine. They've always been mine, and I have always been theirs."